This is National Educational Television, a program produced for the Educational Television and Radio Center.
This is a program about you, your thoughts and why you think them, your actions and why you make them. To explain it all, here's Dr. Fred McKinney, professor of psychology at the University of Missouri.
How do you do? Let's look at this man here.
Have you got a cigarette?
Have you ever felt that way? Apparently, he's trying to break the habit of smoking. He's been working all day, and now he wants a cigarette. He's looked all over for one. He feels he must have it. About 50% of Americans smoke. Many of them, from time to time, want to break the habit of smoking. Now, this program is not on this, no smoking. It's more a program on how to break the habit if you want to. It's not on this, it's more on this. In fact, we're just using smoking as an example of one of the habits, because we find that many people have certain habits that they want to break. I went into a class not so long ago, took a sheet of paper, asked them to pull out a sheet of paper and write down all the habits that they wanted to break. Then I asked them to turn the paper over, and on the other side, write down all the habits that they had already broken. And when I looked at both groups of these, I found great overlapping. That is, all of them had certain habits they wanted to break, but all of them also had broken other habits. And there was not too much difference between the habits that they had broken and the habits they wanted to break. Here were some they mentioned: smoking, wasting time, overeating, being late, jealousy, and drinking were some of the habits they wanted to break. I showed this list of habits to a friend of mine who was a cartoonist, and he drew some cartoons of these various habits as he saw them. And here's the cartoon on drinking. This is what drinking looked to Dick Knoll, the cartoonist. And here's one on chain smoking. Maybe that's the way the chain smoker looks to the non-smoker. And here's one on fingernail biting. There they are, on the floor next to him. And here is bad temper. And Dick Knoll saw this as an angry man trying to choke a little innocent bird. And this is discourtesy to elders, a little imp sawing the floor from under an elderly gentleman. Have you ever thought very much about this matter of habit? Have you ever thought how much a habit was a part of us? Cicero, I think it was, said that habit is second nature. The Duke of Wellington, in hearing this, said, second nature, habit is 10 times nature. We can change our habits, but we can't change them like that. Our habits change just as our profiles change. But they change even faster. But we must know some of the principles behind breaking of habits. Take this matter of habit. Somebody said we are walking bundles of habit, and certainly we are. Suppose you would lose all your habits tomorrow morning. You would be in a pretty sad way. You couldn't get up, because getting up and walking is a habit. You couldn't communicate your difficulties to somebody else because talking is a habit. As a matter of fact, you would be totally incapacitated. One reason why we don't break habits rapidly is that habits are represented by bodily changes, many of them in the nervous system, represented by this diagram here. And there are bodily changes taking place every time we build or break a habit. Now, I think it might be well, if we're going to talk about breaking habits and see if we're going to see what's behind them, behind the process, it might be well to talk with some people who have broken habits. Now, some of these habits seem minor, but to the individual, sometimes a minor habit seems very important, particularly if he tries to break it and can't, because it's tied up with what he thinks of as his will. Now, let's talk to some of these people. The first one is Al Hillix. How are you, Mr. Al Hillix? Good
Fine.
to
How are
see
you,
you.
Dr. McGee?
Have a seat.
Thank you.
What habit did you break?
I broke the habit of playing bridge.
Is that a bad one?
Well, sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. There were at least a couple of reasons why it was a bad habit for me. One of them was that I played 8 to 12 hours a day, and it interfered with all the other things that I ought to be doing. And another reason was that the habit's bad, I think, if you can't quit when you want to, and I just couldn't quit.
I see. It must have meant a lot to you. What do you think you got out of this bridge playing?
Well, now that I look back on it, I think I got acceptance into the group of people that did play bridge, and I got prestige in that group because I played bridge pretty well. I read a lot of books and saw to it that I did play pretty well.
I see. So it really meant something to you. It was satisfying to you.
It meant so much that I couldn't get away from it for more than a day or two at a time.
Well, then how did you break it?
Well, that's another sort of funny thing. I can't really say that I did break it.
Oh.
It sort of broke itself. I tried to
see.
break it and couldn't, and then later I was married and started teaching school, had children, and started doing other things. And when I started doing these other things and satisfying other needs, I guess, through these activities, why, then bridge playing just dropped out, and I didn't have to try to quit.
I see. In other words, it looks like you were satisfying through teaching and through your married life the needs that you were previously satisfying through bridge playing.
Yeah, I
And
guess
when you
that's
satisfied them in a new way, you no longer needed the bridge playing.
I guess that's right.
That's a good point. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
You see what happened there? He wanted to break the habit, but he couldn't break it until he could satisfy these great needs that he had for prestige, being with other people in another way. Now let's talk with another man who has broken a habit, Mr. Aaron Bronstein. Hi, Aaron.
Hi, Doctor.
Good to see you. What do you got there?
Oh, a little picture of
A
myself.
little picture of
30
yourself.
years ago.
Does this illustrate the habit that you
I
broke?
think it does very
Well,
adequately.
let's show that to our audience. How much did you weigh here?
197 pounds.
And how much do you weigh there?
147.
Stand out so they can see you. I see. Quite a difference.
Oh, I'd say so.
Well, why don't you sit down and tell us how you broke this habit? It was a habit of overeating, huh?
It certainly was. I don't really know why I overate. I guess some people could explain it on the basis of a great many things. But before long, overeating became a habit, and I did overeat and got up to an enormous weight.
Did you find that you ate whenever you weren't feeling so good, unhappy, disturbed?
Yes, I'd always think of good excuses to eat.
Yes. Well, now, why did you break the habit?
Well, I found that whatever reasons I had for overeating, certainly weren't as great as the reasons I had for eating. My social life was hampered and things of that sort. It just got in the way, I guess, my stomach did.
Well, it looks like you were having some social life here.
Well, I guess you might say I was a jolly fat man.
I see, who's this pretty girl?
Oh, French movie actress at a
I
college
see.
carnival back home.
Were you dancing with her?
She was dancing and I was rolling.
I see. Yes. Now, you told us why you wanted to break the habit. How did you break it?
Well, I decided all of a sudden to go on a very severe diet, and I got pretty fast results. And in that way, I got a great deal of recognition and praise and some immediate attention from the opposite sex.
I
And this
see.
encouraged me very much.
I see. It was a drastic diet. You got quick results and you saw the results.
I certainly
Did you have under physician's care?
No, I didn't.
Did you have any exercises tied up with this diet?
Just one little one.
I see. What was that?
Oh, simply turning your head and using it at the dinner table.
I see. Thank you very much, Aaron. Aaron was able to break this habit of overeating, mainly because he started out rather drastically, got a great deal of results, and these results encouraged him. Now let's talk to a couple of girls about their habits. Come in, Jenny. Good to see you. How are you?
Hi.
Won't you have a seat? Now, what habit did you break?
Well, I had the habit of fingernail biting.
I see. And why did you want to break it?
Well, it was social pressure mainly,
Uh-huh.
and comparing fingernails, and you could see very definitely it was a lot prettier to have longer nails than to have old stubby bitten off things. that
You'd
could-
watch some of the girls with pretty long nails and compare them to yourself.
Oh, yes.
And that was a strong motivation, huh?
Yes, we sort of looked up to some of the older girls that did
I
have the long
see.
fingernails. and-
Yes. Any other reason?
Well, little sister was a...
Oh, yeah. The little sisters that tantalize, huh?
Yes, indeed.
And then she'd tease you and you'd want longer nails, huh?
Well, just something to make her keep her mouth shut.
Now, you told us why. How did you do it?
Well, that wasn't so easy.
I see.
A couple of us kids started trying to find something we could put in our mouth to take the place of it. So we finally came across, well, we finally decided that we'd use chewing gum.
Some of this.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried chewing a half stick because just as long as we had something in our mouth, so when our fingers went up,
Oh,
we
it
could-
reminded you and you could do something with your mouth.
yes.
And you substituted one habit for the other. How'd you get rid of chewing finger? How'd you get rid of this habit?
Well,
Gum chewing habit.
it did get to be a bit of a habit because we just had to have the gum. But if you didn't have the gum, we'd ask around, right, our little gang, and if no one had gum, well, you just couldn't do anything. You just couldn't chew it.
Didn't
so,
seem to be a stronger habit later, huh?
well, if you didn't have it, you had to do without it.
Oh, I see. But the fingers were always there.
Well, strangely enough, we didn't seem to go back to the fingers.
I
we didn't
see.
want them. They
I
weren't.
see.
They didn't
Yeah.
taste good or something.
I see. Well, thank you very much, Jenny, for telling us about this. Now, Virginia substituted a more desirable habit for a less desirable habit. We've got another girl here that we want to interview to find out something about her habits, Frances Waddell. How are you, Frances?
Fine,
Good to see you. Won't you have a seat?
Sure.
Now, you tell us what habit you broke.
Oh, I broke the habit of violently losing my temper.
I see. And why did you want to break that habit?
Well, after I left high school, I got a job with the telephone company. And we had to have contact with the customer all day, and there you didn't you lose your temper, so I had to break that habit.
Yes, yes. And how did you do it?
Well, we had an education school where we learned how to be courteous,
Oh,
and we learned how to control our temper even though the customer lost his.
I see.
And I carried that over into the home life where I learned how to control my temper with my family and my brothers especially.
And you learned to watch the other fellow losing his temper and to remain calm while he did it.
Yes, I found that when I did that, I had better control over the situation.
That you found that even more satisfying than losing your own temper.
Yes, I did.
Why do you think you lost your temper in the first place? Do you think it got you attention, or you think you dominated the group when you lost your temper?
I just think I didn't have control of my
I
own
see.
self, and I lost my temper.
And when you learned to hold your temper while others lost theirs, you were able to transfer it to the home situation where you previously lost your temper.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Here is a girl who had the urge come from the outside. It was somebody else's idea that she control her temper, and she did. Now let us see what we can gain from this knowledge that we got from these people. What did they tell us? I have here over on the board 3 suggestions for breaking habits. The first is we should see what the habit means to us. What needs does the habit satisfy? And when I was interviewing these people the first time, I jotted down some of the things, some of the meaning that these habits had to them. Take Virginia, for example, who bit her fingernails. She was tense and nervous, and this was a way to relax. She could rip off her fingernails whenever she was tense. Take Aaron. Aaron used to eat every time he felt blue or felt displeasure, and this food seemed to be very satisfying to him. The food had meaning in that connection. Frances lost her temper. She doesn't know why, but she lost her temper at home when she was around other people. I think possibly that was a way to dominate people, a way to get attention at home. And Al played bridge. Bridge meant a lot to him because it brought him prestige, It enabled him to associate with a group he wanted to associate with, and it had a lot of meaning. In all of these cases, these people had habits because the habits satisfied needs that they had and could be satisfied, as I indicated, by what they did, by the habit. Now, in order for them to break the habits that they had to have strong urges to break them. And I think you noticed in these interviews that they all had strong urges to break them. Virginia didn't want to be teased by her little sister, and we know what that is. And she admired some older girls. She looked up to these older girls, and she wanted to be admired by them. And they didn't bite their fingernails. That was her strong reason or strong urge to break them. Aaron wanted to be popular, and he felt he couldn't be popular as long as he was a fat man. He couldn't dance and do the other things, and these represented his strong urges to break the habit. Frances had to please the boss. She wanted to keep her job. And in order to keep her job, she had to keep her temper while others were losing theirs. And this represented her strong motivation. And Al wanted to have more time to do all the things he should be doing, and this represented his strong urge to break the habit. Now, even that wasn't enough. In Al's case, he pointed out very clearly that wasn't enough. He wanted to give up this habit of bridge playing, but he couldn't until after he had other means of satisfying those needs. And he said that when he got married, when he began teaching school, there were other satisfactions, and then the habit broke itself. And that was true of all of these people. Virginia practiced chewing gum instead of biting her fingernails. Aaron dieted, and he found that brought him attention and praise. And he was practicing not eating rather than eating. Frances practiced holding her temper when others lost theirs and watching other people lose their temper. And Al, his new kind of life, taught him to practice, unconsciously almost, new ways to satisfy needs, teaching, and being a family man. Now, let's see if we can apply these three principles here to any habit that you might think of. I'm going to take one habit, the habit of smoking, and illustrate what we learned from these people with that habit. But you can take any habit you want. And I suggest that you pick out one or two habits that mean a great deal to you and take them and apply the principles that we're talking about here. Let's take this habit of smoking. What does this mean to you? Can you remember the first time you took a cigarette like this and put it in your mouth? What was it associated with? What need did it satisfy? Did you find that the older boys smoked, and that by smoking you too could identify yourself with them? Or maybe you found that the group that you wanted to be with smoked. You wanted to have the prestige that this group had, and that's what this meant. Or it may have meant defiance, doing something that an older person told you not to do. It had some meaning. It satisfied some need. And the cigarette advertisers, the people who designed the ads, realized that. What does a typical cigarette ad look like? Let's look at this boy and girl that might be posing for a cigarette ad. They seem to be enjoying each other's company. They seem to be laughing and talking and saying sweet nothings to each other. And in the middle of all of this is a cigarette. The cigarette in this case, and in the case of most ads, is associated with everything that you and I think is pleasant. Stylish people, nice surroundings, smiles, pleasantness. Now, we're not being critical of the advertisers. They're very smart. We can learn a great deal about building or breaking habits from them. But certainly, in order to break this habit or any habit you want, you have to know what it meant to you. And I've tried to suggest some of the things that this cigarette may have meant to you originally and unconsciously may mean to you now. The second step, if you want to break this habit, is to have some strong urges to break it. Well, I have here one strong urge, one of the strongest I know of. I've got a check here made out to you, signed by yourself, for $100. The date is now, or maybe a little later. This is what some people can save by not smoking for a year. And to some people, that would be a strong urge to break the habit. Others might remember what their doctors have said to them, or a man might remember what his coach said to him in the early years. Or you and I might turn to the newspapers nowadays and see the articles about smoking and cancer. We don't know whether these are factual, whether it's a proven matter, or whether it's still in debate, but nevertheless, to some people, this would represent a strong urge to break the habit. But then, even that isn't enough. The next step is new habits. Build up through practice, new ways to satisfy needs. And this little book on how to stop smoking that I held up at the beginning of the program, this little book suggests that you and I find other things to do with our mouths, that possibly we get some mints or gum or a Coke. The book suggests that we be good to ourselves, that we find other ways that are satisfying rather than the cigarette smoking habit, and practice these. Now, there's another habit that I'd like to talk about, the habit found in the alcoholic. But before I get on to that, here's a statement I came across that's interesting in connection with these habits, because all of these habits are habits that involve our mouths. And we don't think of our mouths as being a source of trouble, but this statement says many of our troubles in life come from the use of our mouths. We eat too much, we drink too much, we say too much, and maybe we smoke too much. The alcoholic is the individual who drinks too much. Now, the typical alcoholic says, I can take it or leave it. But in actual practice, he only does one of these. He takes it. And he goes along for a number of years, and then suddenly he discovers that alcoholism, or his habit, is getting him into more trouble than he can live with. He loses a job, he gets his family into difficulty, and all of these become very disturbing to him. Now, let's ask, why did he become an alcoholic in the first place? What needs are satisfied by drinking? Certainly it's not the taste. Well, what else could it be? If you ask them, they say, I feel more at ease. I can forget myself. I can get a little closer to people. And these are some of the needs that the alcoholic finds. I'm less critical of myself. I don't feel so unworthy. But when he finally decides that he can't keep his present status and drink, he finally decides he's allergic to it, he talks it over with people, he works out a new program, then he may join a very important group, represented by this book. And the group is called Alcoholics Anonymous, and you can get the book from your library. It's a story of Bill and how he gave up alcohol. And if the alcoholic belongs to this group, he meets with other fellows who are alcoholics. They tell their story. They begin to see what it meant to them. They still meet in groups, and sometimes they still meet in the same places. But this time, instead of looking for bottles, they look for men. And they find other alcoholics and tell their story. Then there's a religious aspect to this movement, and the individual begins to to feel more worthy and more able and less inferior. And then he has a program of doing things for other people, losing himself by doing things for other people. In other words, not only does he have strong urges to break, but he has all kinds of new ways to satisfy these needs, which he practices day after day. Well, we've talked about breaking habits. We've seen some people that break habits. We could find a lot of people who tried to break habits and didn't get there. But it would be kind of hard to get them to come on this program. You know, Mark Twain says, it's easy to give up smoking. I've given it up thousands of times. Well, it's easy to find people in the same boat, but it's hard to get them to come on a program like this. But I have one boy that I'd like to introduce to you who's going to tell us about his attempt to break the habit of smoking and what happened. Come in, Kent. Good to see you.
Dr. Mick.
How are you? Have a seat. How long were you smoking when you decided to break the habit?
About 3 years, I'd say.
And then you decided one day to quit. Why?
Well, I read the book,
This little book.
That book on how to stop smoking, the argument sounded reasonable, so I thought I'd try it.
Sort of a challenge to you.
That's
huh?
right.
And how did you do it?
Well, I just followed the directions in the book.
And what happened?
Well, I got a lot of attention from my friends and everything. They found out I was going to stop smoking, or had stopped smoking.
Yeah.
And they tempted me with cigarettes and all kinds of things. And
Blue smoke in your face,
That's
maybe?
right.
And tried to get you to go back, but you did.
That's right.
And that was very satisfying to you. Well, why did you quit the no-smoking habit in 4 days?
Well, after about 3 days, well, they all assumed that I had quit smoking.
I see.
And so they left me alone.
I see. And you no longer got any attention. Now, cigarette smoking must have meant a lot to you.
Well, I felt that it helped me in social positions and made me feel more at ease.
More at ease,
And
yeah.
gave me something to do with my hands.
Thank you very much, Kent,
That's
for
what
telling us about that. You see what happened in Kent's case? Cigarette smoking meant a great deal to him. And he didn't have strong urges to break it, as he pointed out. It was just a challenge, a whim, and as long as he got results, he didn't smoke. But when the boys began to forget that he was breaking the habit of smoking and didn't tease him and tempt him anymore, he went back to the old habit. Now, he never did practice many new ways to satisfy these new needs. He didn't have strong urges to break. He didn't practice new ways to satisfy these needs, and the needs were very strong, and as he indicated, they were all tied up with cigarette smoking. What have we said today? We have said that you and I can break habits, but we can't break them merely by wishing to break them. Because habits are a part of us because they satisfy needs, and they're going to be with us as long as they satisfy those needs. We have to have strong urges to break the habit. And then, not only do we need these strong urges, because that's not enough, we have to have a new way of life, new habits, and new attitudes that will satisfy these old needs. The habits are there for a reason. They are satisfying. And they're satisfying things that are very important to us. And they'll stay there unless we find new ways to satisfy the needs. Now, if we find new ways to satisfy the needs, it's not so hard to break the habit because we have to practice because the habit's a part of us. But eventually, that habit will fall by the wayside and a new habit will take its place. Thomas à Kempis summarizes this very well when he says, habit is overcome by habit. I hope you'll be with us on other programs when we talk about you and how you feel and act. And until then, think about and talk about some of the things that we mentioned here. Bye-bye.
Not in Our Stars is conducted by Dr. Fred McKinney, Professor of Psychology at the University of... The program is prepared for television by Dr. Fred McKinney and W.A. Hillocks. Directed by Charles Sigsbee. Not in Our Stars is a production of the television service of the University of Missouri.
The preceding program was produced for the Educational Television and Radio Center. This is National Educational Television.